One thing that experts across the political spectrum agree on is that healthcare in America often costs too much.
If you look at kind of what we spend about $5 trillion here in the United States on healthcare alone. We spend 1/2 of the global healthcare spend just here in the United States. We're great at chasing disease, and we've done that for literally the entire existence of medicine. But now we're at this point where we really want to work toward how do we bring technology to healthcare to start to detect problems long before they ever become a problem, long before you have a symptom, and then start to treat them so that you don't have to live with them in the latter part of your life. It is, once again, whether it be hospitals, they're paid for heads and beds, whether it be pharma, they're paid for drugs, whether it be insurance companies, they're paid to administrate claims. We really don't have anybody, I would say, advocating for the patient in the middle of all this. And really, that's where we need to start. The idea was when we started to see the emergence of technology and the way that we could possibly really reshape how we do healthcare. But what you don't want to do is spend the last 10 to 15% of your life in decline. And what we know from the data, and one of the reasons we built Fountain, is we know that you can make 95 healthy today with what we know. We don't need a breakthrough in gene therapy. We don't need a new, particular type of medication to be discovered. With what we know today, you can make 95 healthy. But your first job is don't die of something stupid.
All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of The Resilient Show. I'm here with Dr. William Kapp, a medical doctor who is one of the founders of Fountain Life, which started in 2020 with Tony Robbins. And I am now a patient of Fountain Life. And we talked about this a couple of, maybe close to a year ago. And before, I really want to interview you or Tony about Fountain Life because I'm so intrigued about the process, but I want to be a patient first. And so first of all, before we get started, I want to say thank you for you guys welcoming me in and the care that I've received through Dr. Corman and your whole team there. It's been amazing. And I'm so glad I did it that way because I feel so much more equipped to be able to have this conversation with you. So first, thank you.
Well, great. Well, I'm glad to be here, and thank you for having me. And we'd like to refer to you as a member, not a patient.
A patient. Okay, I like that better.
And the reason I say that is because our goal is to make you not, you're already in great shape, but to make you better. And so, yes. Versus the regular healthcare system, which is really focused on what we would call sick care. Right.
Well, that's the whole kind of idea of rejuvenative care and preventative care is to not just be just focused on the problem after it occurs, right? Is actually preventing.
Yeah, I think the whole goal here at Fountain was fundamentally transform healthcare because we know we've got a huge opportunity to do that. We have a pretty broken healthcare system today. If you look at kind of what we spend about $5 trillion here in the United States on healthcare alone. Right. We spend 1/2 of the global healthcare spend just here in the United States. And for all of that, not that we're not good at sick care, we're really good at sick care. As a matter of fact, we need to replumb your heart. We're really good at that. We need a coil in your brain. You need the latest cancer therapy. We're great at that. We're great at chasing disease. And we've done that for literally the entire existence of medicine. But now we're at this point where we can't just chase disease anymore. In order to get control of cost and improve quality, we've got to go to the front end of the line, meaning we need to start adopting a lot of concepts that the military does. I mean, military is all about prevention of problems before they begin. That's why we do so much work around safety. And whether you're on the range or you're in an aircraft, safety is number one. So we really want to work toward how do we bring technology to healthcare to start to detect problems long before they ever become a problem, long before you have a symptom, and then start to treat them so that you don't have to live with them in the latter part of your life.
Now, and I think there's two kind of modes of thought in healthcare in the United States. One is preventing people from being sick, and two is treating people who are sick. There's a lot of contrast in those two things, but there's a lot of opposition, right? So a company like Fountain Life is in, I wouldn't say competition, but a direct threat to big pharmaceutical industries and companies that would prefer ideally for people to be sick.
Yeah, I think, there is no doubt that there is a lot of financial incentive from hospitals. I mean, having been in the hospital space for a long time and having built electronic health records companies and understanding what that side of the business is like. But, it was really about 8 or 10 years ago that we started to see the advent of technology for the first time that would allow us to detect disease early. And what's important about that is you have to understand that how medicine got started for the last 500 years, and particularly over the last 150 years. For a long time, there wasn't much we could do. When we talk about the word hospital, It actually comes from a word called hospice. And the early hospitals were where you went to die. You didn't go there to get better, you went to die. And so they've got these all over Europe. They're kind of museums now. But what we were really good at, and since you didn't live very long, I mean, if you lived 150 years ago, you might have made age 40, because you either died of infection or trauma. We just didn't have antibiotics. We didn't have vaccines. We didn't have public health measures. And so what's really changed in healthcare is that we need to change our focus, because when we were treating acute disease, meaning if you had an appendicitis or if you had an infection or a pneumonia, we had very limited tool set. So we're always matching your symptoms to the diagnosis. But now what we have is we're treating 80% of what we're treating as chronic disease, and it doesn't get symptoms until it's late. And so the healthcare system has to undergo a transformation like most industries. And I think this is one that, hopefully, they will take to at some point. But there is no doubt there's this disruption coming, because we're spending, like I said, $5 trillion on healthcare in the United States. We spend, for all of that spending, we rank 64 in longevity. Of all the countries out there, we're number 64. So we're not really getting a good return, I would say, on our investment. But more importantly, we need to change the incentive structure, and we need to change how people think about healthcare. And I don't know that it's going to come through the healthcare system. I have a strong belief that it's going to be individuals that become CEO of their own health. They're asking better questions. And now armed with AI, I think they're going to be even more effective.
Absolutely. But one of the things that, as I did my research in this, it seemed like the biggest beneficiary of people being sick in America is not just the big pharmaceutical companies, but the insurance companies. I would suspect like a company like Fountain Life preventing people from becoming sick would be something that would be appealing to insurance companies, but hadn't seemed to be the case.
No, it's unfortunately. So, a lot of this, we can get into the politics of it and how, we cover healthcare in the United States and why we do it the way we do. But the reality is, and one of the little kept secrets out there is that literally 70% of Americans today are not covered by one of the big insurance companies. They're actually covered through employers, because their employers are self-insured. In order to control costs, they decided to become self-insured. And so they use a network or rent a network from a big insurance company. But really, the insurance company has become an administrator of the plan. And it's the employer that takes the risk, because they're buying, stop loss insurance and all the things so that they have catastrophic claims. But it's actually the employers that are paying the higher and higher premiums. So what I think has happened over the last 20, 25 years is this risk has really shifted from the insurance companies to employers and individuals. And a lot of us are unaware of it because it's not really widely publicized. If you're an insurance company, you're working on a percentage of the premium. So premium goes up, you do better. So the point is, once again, whether it be hospitals, they're paid for heads and beds, whether it be pharma, they're paid for drugs, whether it be insurance companies, they're paid to administrate claims. We really don't have anybody, I would say, advocating for the patient in the middle of all this. And really, that's where we need to start.
Do you feel optimistic that in the future we'll see insurance companies financially covering preventative care? Well,
they'll tell you they cover it now. We'll get into what they really cover, because what they cover is just very, very minimal. And I think, it's mandated by law that they have to cover some of this preventive testing. But we know that the preventive testing is just not sufficient today, knowing where the technology is. Whether we see that, or better yet, we may see employer groups. I'm more optimistic than employer groups trying to control cost and improve care for their employees will change their model of care to be a lot more proactive and create incentives around the employees to adopt a healthier lifestyle. I'm very excited about having, the current group of people like RFK Jr. working at the top of the field, because he's pushing the concept. A lot of people don't like the way he brings the concept to them, but the MAHA movement is real. Dr. Mehmet Oz is obviously very, tuned in all of this. It is the only path forward for us long-term for healthcare in the United States, especially with an aging population.
You started as a U.S. Air Force flight surgeon. I'm glad we meet here, and I never met you prior to.
If you'd have been in my airplane, we'd have been bringing you back from probably some theater somewhere. Yeah.
But how'd that influence what you do today? I mean, just so you know, like the audience of the show, we have a very large following, a military audience.
Awesome.
They would really appreciate, the fact that you did serve
Yeah. So, I mean, look, I loved some of the best parts of, my life for sure. My dad was a Navy pilot. He flew in Vietnam. So, we're a military family, and I had a decision to make whether I would, go in the military full time or go into medicine. And I really had a passion for medicine. But while I was going through medical school, I still couldn't quite shake this idea that I really wanted to serve. And so I did join the Air Force because my dad was a pilot. I was already a civilian pilot. I was very interested in all the aviation component of it. But what it really did for me is, as we kind of walk through and you see how we practice medicine in the Air Force, particularly around aerospace medicine, we're very focused on prevention with pilots. And so it was a little bit of a culture shock when I left the Air Force and I wound up going out into private practice, and all of a sudden there was not a lot of emphasis on preventing problems. There wasn't a big emphasis on keeping the air crews healthy, but keeping patients healthy, I should say, like we would normally with air crews. So it was a little bit of a culture shock, and over a period of time working through the healthcare system, trying to figure out how to lower costs and improve quality, I finally realized that we're probably going to have a pretty big break in the system to be able to change it.
When you started your entrepreneurial ventures, what was the kind of motivation behind that?
Really trying to make a change and make a difference. I'd spent, better part of, a decade or more training in orthopedics and, doing everything. I trained here in Houston at the Baylor College of Medicine and did all my orthopedic training here and my fellowship training here. So it was a great opportunity to learn. But when I got out into private practice, I was always stunned at how expensive it was for the average person to go to the hospital and get a surgical procedure. And, as physicians, we're really not taught any of that. Matter of fact, we get zero training in business in medical school. So if you ask your doctor what the hospital bill is, he has no idea. But he may not even know what he's charging, quite frankly, because we're really not trained in the business side of medicine. And so I got very interested in asking questions about, how much do things cost and why does it cost so much? And so, I got very interested in the business side and while I started private practice, not only for my practice, but also for my patient's sake. And what I realized pretty quickly is that at some point we would need to change the system. I thought I could do that through the healthcare system. So we built a low-cost surgery center. We developed all kinds of programs to lower cost, improve quality, and lower the cost for the average person, out-of-pocket expenses. And it was after doing that for a number of years where I finally realized that we would need to take this far more radical, proactive approach.
So you're a Landmark Hospitals, which specialize in post-acute care for complex cases. How did this reveal the roles in mitochondrial health and cellular repair and like immune resets? And those kind of things?
I got into the hospital space, critical care hospital space, because we didn't have one in the town I practiced in. I practiced in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, which was a small town in southeast Missouri. Rush Limbaugh's hometown. David Limbaugh was my next door neighbor. And so I got to know the community very well. I wasn't from there. I grew up in Atlanta, but what was nice about it is the ability to bring new services. So I brought we started a hospital company there, which we actually expanded nationally. But what I got very interested in was this idea of, we had really super critically ill patients that were super debilitated. The point was, how can we improve their overall health? Because once again, getting them through their acute illness is one thing, but how do you recover them? How do you get their muscle mass back, their cognitive function, all of that? So we had a lot of rehab programs that were heavily predicated on those types of concepts, particularly. And when you talk about mitochondrial function, particularly for whether you're well or you're sick, mitochondria is the energy, it's the power plant of the cell. So that's where you really want to focus your attention, and whether that be in exercise, strength training, aerobic exercise, zone 2 training, or things like peptides that you can use with injured patients or sick patients that can improve their muscle mass and their mitochondrial function. Those were all areas that we looked at.
Hormones, mitochondria, why are all these things important? I mean, in a space, I'm an athlete. I've been an athlete. I've been in sports for 45 years. I started martial arts when I was 5 years old. I've been a professional athlete. In my world, a lot of people are very focused on their nutrients and but this isn't just for athletes. Everyone should be concerned in monitoring their, because it's available. The technology is available. The medicine's available. The supplementation of these things are available. Why, or should hormones, mitochondria, nutrients, why should that be as important to everyone?
Yeah. So great question. And I think it's super important because One of the challenges is in healthcare today is that, like we talked about, your doctor's really not paid to keep you healthy in most instances. And so because of that, we don't accelerate the science and the technology fast enough to get to patients. And that's a real challenge. We know that in the environment today, it doesn't really matter where you live. You're exposed to microplastics, you're exposed to xenoestrogens, you're exposed to toxins out in the environment that have a huge impact on your mitochondria, which is the energy plant of the cell. And then in addition to that, we're seeing pretty radical declines in testosterone levels, in hormone levels, not only in men, but obviously in women as well. And so this is causing a fundamental disruption in everything from fertility to birth rates around the world. And we're seeing this right now. And so we can see this when we look at sperm counts, we look at testosterone levels, they're significantly lower than
I see these charts that are online, and you wonder if they're propaganda or not, like, because they're memes, anybody can make them. But they say like the average testosterone level of a 20-something-year-old male today is like is equivalent to like a 60-year-old male 50 years ago.
There's no doubt about that. As a matter of fact, in our data, we've got 10,000 people that have been through our testing process. It's interesting because we have a sort of large number of males between 20 and 29, and 5 to 10% of those people have a testosterone level below 300. So just to give you an idea what the ranges are, the ranges run between 300 and 900 today for a quote normal testosterone. Okay. Now it's a pretty wide variety of that. It's a big range in there. And by the way, they take all comers, and that's not necessarily used specifically for your age and body habitus. But the second component of that is, what you have to remember is 20 years ago, the ranges were far different.
Yeah.
The low end was 450.
300 and a 20-year-old. I mean, I think when you hit like 350, you start sitting down to pee.
Yeah, exactly. I tell people all the time, I said, when somebody comes in with a testosterone of 300 and they're 25 years old, they go, is that normal? I said, if you're 85, it's perfect.
Yeah.
But the reality is, it is the most critical hormone that you have today. Testosterone for males is the biggest driver of not just libido and muscle mass, but also neurocognitive function. And so I think that's
Can you talk
super
about that
important.
a little bit, like how that affects your?
Yeah,
because I think everyone thinks of energy, muscle,
Right.
like fat. That's what people think of, but it's much deeper than that.
It is much deeper. It's actually probably one of the primary neurohormones. And we see this in patients. And quite frankly, what we saw quite often in the Air Force, people with traumatic brain injury, which is pretty common in the military, right? So it was not uncommon 10 years ago, now it's less common today, that somebody would come in after a traumatic brain injury, and your brain gets jarred in your skull pretty hard, right? You get a concussive blast, or you have whether you're looking at it acutely like that, or you're looking at something like NFL football players where they have repetitive head trauma, right? Yeah. Or boxers, right? So we can see this. But the point is, we can measure that, because what's happened is the brain gets shaken in the skull, and the one part of the brain that's responsible for releasing what they call luteinizing hormone, which is actually what goes down to create more. It drops down, and so your testicles make more testosterone. Well, it gets damaged. Like anything else, it can get bruised, and it doesn't create as much luteinizing hormone. So, quite frankly, what happens is these guys get depressed. They come in, they don't have any energy. They may have issues with the family. They're just not the same person they used to be. And what do? We give them the most second most commonly prescribed drug in America, which is an antidepressant, right? And we don't look to see, hey, what was their testosterone level? And quite frankly, when you test those people, sometimes their testosterone level is 150. So restoring that testosterone level back to a normal, healthy range, their depressive symptoms go away. All of their lethargy, what we call anhedonia, the ability to be happy or to find pleasure in things, disappears. And that just is because one simple problem in the brain that stopped making a substance that you need to have a normal testosterone level. So these are the things. And when we start talking about neurocognitive change, when you talk about somebody who ages, and by the way, after age 40, your testosterone levels is going to go down. Whatever you started at, you're going to be lower, over the next several years. So what we endeavor to do is keep you at the top end of the range, where you are healthy.
Why? I see, I'm 50 now. And so my age demographic is where a lot of my friends are transitioning to making the decision to go on testosterone. But a lot of them are scared because they're like, or thinking, now I'm going to be on this the rest of my life. There's side effects. It's dangerous. It causes cancer. Like all these things. So what are their
Yeah. So first of all, there's a lot of falsehoods out there today. And I would tell you, the cutting edge of the science today would tell you there is no increased risk of cancer at all. Okay. That was a myth that got started a long time ago from a bad paper that got perpetuated. Same thing, they'll say, oh, there's increased risk for cardiovascular disease. Absolutely. It's been totally refuted now. The problem is the information hasn't necessarily gotten down to the medical schools, and the guys who are in private practice today, they may have been trained. And unfortunately, a lot of physicians kind of stop learning, after you leave residency, and you kind of repeat what you learn because it's kind of, those were your mentors and that's what you believed. I would tell you that what we're seeing, and then I think also testosterone got a bad rap because it was in the bodybuilding community, right?
People abusing it like anything else.
Right. So, I mean, it's nice to have a testosterone of 800 or 900. Do you need one of 2,000? Probably not. Okay. No. It's probably too high, just like in most things. A little's good. More is better, people think, but not in this case. We want to keep you in a normal physiologic range. If we keep you in a normal physiologic range, we avoid all the side effects that most people deal with. The component of this is the vilification that happened with testosterone from the government, from medical agencies, from the Endocrine Association. But we're seeing that change now. You're
even
actually
like
starting to see that.
Thing, USADA. Like,
absolutely.
You have it's a banned substance. It's still a banned substance today in USADA, which is the regulatory body for sports, because it's like a enhancing drug when actually it's a leveling. To me, it's a leveling the playing field.
It is a leveling the playing field. You're exactly right. And I think we will see that this change. We've seen it change in a few areas, where people understand what the need is. And, they always say, well, do you have a physiologic reason to need it? There's lots of stuff going on in the environment, like we talked about, that could certainly lower your testosterone level. Our goal is when people come to us is, for instance, what I find funny is we want to ban testosterone, but we don't think anything about letting your blood sugar continue to drift upwards and then putting you on insulin.
Right.
We have no problem with insulin, right? You can take insulin 3 times a day. Congratulations. When it turns out a low testosterone level, when it was corrected with getting your muscle mass back to normal, would probably keep you off insulin anyway. But yet we don't look at the root cause. We just treat the symptom, which is the elevated blood sugar. So, in medicine, we're really good at prescribing pills, and nobody ever walks out of the doctor's office without a prescription. That's kind of been the moniker for years and years. And I think when it comes to things like testosterone, it's training physicians. There's still physicians that are terrified of it, for some reason. And I don't understand that because the science is pretty well settled at this point.
Yeah, that's why I ask, because I know it's something that people are trying to get more information on, so to hear it directly from you. One of the other things is longevity. People feel like if they take it, they might have a shorter lifespan.
That's actually the reverse.
It must be the opposite, right?
It's exactly right. So when we look at male cohorts that live a really, really long time, they all have a high testosterone level. Okay. So when you're talking about men living a long time, their testosterone level is super important. You'll hear people say, it accelerates aging because there's a thing called mTOR, which is a biomarker of accelerated aging, and testosterone affects that. That's not correct. Okay. So one of the problems is, what people read and what they extract from, social media, what they extract from physicians who are ill-informed and not used to taking care of these patients. Mm-hmm. Look, it's just like any other medication. You got to make sure to use it correctly. It has to be dosed, and you got to find out what your response is, right? Mm-hmm. So everybody has a little bit of different response. Some people they go straight to normal ranges and they have no side effects. Others have a few side effects, but those all can be balanced.
Sure.
But the point is, look, if you want optimal cardiovascular health, you want optimal muscle mass because it's huge for cognitive function. Getting muscle, there's a direct correlation with how much muscle you carry and how well your brain works. And we know this over and over and over again. And the biggest correlation we've seen with longevity from a physiologic point of view, the more muscle mass you have, the longer you live, end of story, full stop. That has been studied over and over again. And yet we still have everybody running on a treadmill instead of lifting weights in the gym. So this is important.
So since we're definitely endorsing testosterone here, and I'm right there with you, I think we should also say that there's probably a little bit too easy access to where you could go, at least my perspective, where you could go to a doctor that's not qualified or doesn't have the appropriate training to test you correctly and give you the right balance and making sure the estrogens and all the free testosterones. And that's where a company like you guys come in to be more experts. But the truth is almost any doctor could just give it out in some cases irresponsibly.
Well, and we see that, right? Where people who, putting people at 2,000, because the patient wants it, and, some doctors are willing to do that. What we do at Found is we take a holistic approach, and we can, as we talk more about this, but, you want to know what is your baseline and why is it low in the first place? Not just it's low, let's give you testosterone. And by the way, if you're relatively young, okay, if you're under 50, let's say, or it's certainly under 40, there are other ways to boost your testosterone that doesn't involve giving you testosterone shots or pellets or one other type of medication. There's your pituitary, which we talked about, that it can get damaged, from a head injury, is what is responsible for creating luteinizing hormone. That pituitary, it turns out, you can use certain drugs that will block what they call certain estrogens from attacking it, or from interacting with it, and it will actually not naturally allow you to increase your testosterone normally. So there are medications, there are all kinds of different ways, but number one is, why is your testosterone low? Do you not make enough? Is your brain not producing enough of the substances to let you make more? Are there ways to work around your biochemistry? And those are things that we do pretty commonly at Found.
Let's talk about peptides.
Sure.
We were talking about peptides right before we came in.
Right.
I'm super interested. I just started ipamorelin.
Ipamorelin. CJC 1295 with it, or just ipamorelin?
I don't know.
Probably both. Probably it's a combination.
It's from Fountain Life.
Yeah. Well, I imagine you have the combination.
Yeah. And there's lots of good peptides out there. What are the pros? Are there any cons to peptides?
Yeah. So like it's everything else, is what's the indication and what are we trying to correct? What's the root cause? So first of all, you need to make sure you have a doctor that's been trained in them, and not a lot of physicians are trained in them. There are organizations out there like the Clinical Peptide Society and in the Academy for or A4M, which is a anti-aging that can treat these. It has these courses for physicians out there. There are a lot of peptides that are naturally occurring in your body that you lose over time just due to age. And that's what we're trying to either stimulate the body to make more of. So something like ipamorelin helps boost your growth hormone levels, which decline after age 40. We see testosterone go down. We see growth hormone go down. We see a lot of the different other things that, your repair functions go down. So these peptides are designed to augment that. So certainly things like if you want to boost your growth hormone, one of the things to do is the CJC 1295 and ipamorelin, they act on the pituitary again, just like we talked about with testosterone. So it's important because it allows the body to make more of its own growth hormone. So you don't have to take growth hormone, and that may be an option for some people, but quite frankly, it's hard to regulate. So it's easier for us actually to give you a peptide that makes your body make more of it. So it's super important. The second component of that are things like DPC 157, which is a recovery hormone. You'll hear a lot about the Wolverine, protocols.
Yeah, the Wolverine stack with, a lot of guys in jiu-jitsu, do jiu-jitsu, and if they get hurt, they swear by the Wolverine stack, which is BP 157 and TB500. So those are really good drugs to help boost recovery. And we know that. And one of the challenges with peptides is, are they FDA regulated, or have they been proven to be regulated? And unfortunately, with some of these peptides, they're so common and so easy to produce that nobody's going to take these through a drug trial because it's too expensive. They're not going to spend tens of millions of dollars to, quote, prove something that they can't then really corner the market on because they're too easy to produce. So I think what is important is to know which ones have been banned by the FDA. And then there are a lot that are in the gray area. So there's a lot of discretion in the field of medicine in terms of what a physician can prescribe and what they're allowed to prescribe. And so, for instance, we commonly take medications that
were approved by the FDA for one indication, and we use what they call off-label indications. We'll use it for something else. And we see this commonly with drugs that are repurposed. Sometimes we find an orphan drug that was discovered by, some pharma company and put away, and then we found out it has a better use in another location. So that's part of what your doctor can do for you. And that's what's important about finding a physician that's well-versed in peptides, so they know what you need, what the root cause of your problem is, and which of the peptides we can use in that approved area to be able to access those.
Since 157 is so popular, and I know people are probably interested in hearing about it, the one you guys are using at Fountain Life is called PDEA.
Yeah, so we're using one that is it's a pentapeptide, so it's a derivative of BPC 157.
What's it actually do? Like, my knee's injured, I inject it into my knee.
Yeah, so it really was it was originally discovered as a gastric peptide. It's something your body normally made, and over time you kind of lose the ability to do it. But it does a lot in terms of rebuilding cartilage and collagen, and really accelerating the recovery responses.
One of the things I hear people talk about is they had a lot of pain, inflammation, and inflammation goes away.
It does. It really does, because it helps modulate the immune response as well.
Okay.
So, when we have injuries, and, as an orthopedic surgeon, we, always say there were two injuries, right? There's the one you had on the field, or the one you had from your injury. And the second one is when the orthopedic surgeon went after you, right? Because that's the second injury that you get from the surgery. So what you're really fighting in that situation is you want to keep inflammation at a relatively low level. You don't want it gone, because you need some inflammation to have the healing process work. But particularly for chronic injuries where there's not a surgical indication, where we're dealing with osteoarthritis or just an injury to a ligament, getting the inflammation down to where the body's not really, attacking itself anymore is super helpful.
One of the things that I think you guys are leading on at Fountain Life is treating or kind of re-stimulating your mitochondria, and what SS31. I think
SS31 is the latest peptide that has now been approved by the FDA. Yes.
So what's that do for your mitochondria? I guess first of all, can you explain what mitochondria is and why we would need to supplement it?
Yeah, so I think the whole field of whether it be longevity or high performance or looking just at aging period is really going to get predicated down to looking at the mitochondria. So when we find mitochondrial dysfunction, meaning so if you remember high school biology, everybody remembers the mitochondria was the power plant of the cell, right? So, and by the way, some cells have one or two mitochondria, other cells are packed with mitochondria, depending on what their function is. But the cells make what they call ATP, which is the currency of the cell, the energy currency of the cell. And over time, due to toxins, due to stressors, it could be even low testosterone, things of this nature, the mitochondria are not as efficient. So the question is, how do you increase their efficiency? And now there are peptides out there. There's one called MOTC that a lot of people have heard about, but there's a latest one called SS31. And SS31 has now been approved for an off-label indication. It was originally, the studies were for a genetic disorder where your mitochondria just don't function well. And so now the FDA just recently approved it a few weeks ago. And so this is a one that allows the mitochondria to recover and actually make more of this ATP or this energy production inside the cell. So it's one of those that people are super excited about, because for the first time we can actually go to the root cause, which is the mitochondrial dysfunction that we're dealing with. By the way, mitochondrial dysfunction has been implicated in cancer as well. So once again, we want a robust immune system. We want robust cellular health. The mitochondria is pretty pivotal to that.
What are you going to feel? Like what's if I want to say a patient, a member of Fountain Life is going to, what are you going to experience?
So energy is the biggest thing. People feel like they can do things they couldn't do before. Their athletic performance improves. They certainly lose weight faster. We know that. But then in addition to that, they just feel a little more like they used to when they were younger. But if you go to the gym, you're going to recover faster. You'll probably put on muscle a little faster as long as you're getting the right nutritional components. But those are the biggest components we've seen. It's just a real boost in energy. MOTC similar, but we're really excited about SS31 as well.
For me personally, and my audience here has heard me talk a lot about stem cell. I'm a partner bioaccelerator down in Colombia, and been down there in 3 years now. I've had 4 treatments, and I feel like it's knocked off a decade of my age. Like, awesome. I feel amazing. I have had injuries that I thought I was living with the rest of my life with. Injuries that I didn't even know I had were healed. Like, I'm blown away at what stem cell is able to do, and seeing other people go down there and their results. So first of all, what's your perspective on stem cell therapy for rejuvenative care?
Look, I think stem cells have got to. So first of all, we need to collect better data, and that's one of the things we're working on. But I think that the dawn of cellular therapy is finally here, and part of that is cellular therapy, okay. And part of that's just really the complexity of the human body. So if you think about the human body, the average person has between 37 and 40 trillion cells in their body.
Okay,
huge number. Every cell has about 1 trillion molecules. And inside that one single cell that does between 1 and 10 billion chemical reactions per second per cell. So we're pretty smart, right? We've got all these fancy gadgets, but we're barely scratching the surface. But what's important about that is that it's probably not going to be one single molecule. It's probably not going to be one single substance, some sort of pharmacologic agent that's going to, effectively reverse aging or to even slow the aging process. We're going to need to go back and start to harness the subroutines that nature and God has been doing for years, right? Mm-hmm. And so the point being that if you have a broken immune system, we could reset your immune system using cellular therapy. If you have broken tissues, we can use the cells that are responsible for normally creating those tissues or growing those tissues to help repair those tissues, because those cells know and can signal between each other what needs to be secreted, what needs to be repaired. Far more intelligent than we are about this at this point. And people ask me all the time, isn't AI going to fix all of this? And I said, well, it's great if you have a base knowledge layer, but there's so much we don't even know. And so I think this is where the field of cellular medicine comes in. And when you start talking about things like stem cell therapy from cord blood or placental derived tissues, it's enormous. That's regenerative capacity of the placenta and cord blood tissue is immense. And part of that is because it is what's responsible for growing a baby. Mm-hmm. And you take a baby from, one single embryo to a fully formed, fetus and then, beyond. It's miracle, number one, that there are not more, abnormalities as the development happens. But more importantly, it's the ability of that placenta and that cord blood to nurture that type of regenerative capacity. So I think we're starting to harness this now. And we're starting to see this, and we're seeing this. Obviously, the government's slow on adoption of this, although we're excited about the state of Florida's pushing into this area. But using cells that know better than we do to fix problems, that they were originally designed for, I think is super important. And as we start using these mesenchymal stem cells, I think we'll see more.
Yeah, I'm a Christian, and so I believe we were created, and God just had this incredible ability for the human, the creation of a human, to be able to come from the spark of life. And especially that first 9 months in the womb to be able to just develop like that. That's something that we can never explain. I don't think any doctor on the planet can explain. So I love the way you say that. You just take part of the human body and inject it into another part of the human body and let creation do its thing.
Right. And what's important about that is, so I don't know if you've ever seen the pictures where when a sperm, fertilizes an egg, there's actually a flash of light.
Yes.
And it's really fascinating, right? So we talk about the chemical structures of a cell, and we talk about the chemical structures of the body and, 37 trillion cells, whatever. But what we don't talk about is the energy state, because we just ignore that part.
Right.
And we have no idea how that works. But just it turns out that
lights up and
right. But that energy state is largely driven by mitochondria as well. So I think we're going to learn a lot over the next, decade or 2 decades. But I do think that this ability to take really what is the primordial, cradle of life and use those tissues, whether they be stem cells or placental biomaterials, to help regenerate the body. And we see this, we use them in surgery. When I was doing spinal surgery, in orthopedic surgery, we use placental membranes because they've got huge growth potential, and we use them for wound care. So we're using all these substances. And so it's time that we start using the cells as well.
Yeah. So one of the reasons we see, people going down out of the country is because of the regulations at FDA. And one of the reasons I've go down to BioAccelerator, who's going to be coming here. I'm going to be pushing you guys to work together because I just love both of the companies. But that's changing in the United States. And you mentioned Florida. So what are some deregulations that we're seeing that allow some of this care to be more available in the States? Yeah,
so right now we're seeing there are a couple states that have rolled back regulations in terms of banning the ability to use cord blood or placental-derived stem cells. So Florida was the most recent to do that. I think Utah's done this, Montana's done this. There are other states that are in the process of doing this. We're very excited because the governor in Florida, along with both branches of the legislature, voted unanimously. Not one single dissenting vote, which is unusual in Florida.
Unusual. In 2025, it's pretty unusual.
Pretty unusual. But they voted unanimously to allow stem cell therapy in the state of Florida. And so, it's not FDA approved. I remind people all the time, even hip replacements aren't necessarily FDA approved because they go through a whole different separate approval process. And there are lots of drugs out there that are FDA approved that are being used differently. So that doesn't particularly bother me. But I also think that the FDA has decided, as long as it's relatively safe and there's no adverse events, then you can continue to use these in clinical practice, collecting data. And so what we do at Fountain Life is work hard to not only do stem cell therapy. First of all, we want to screen you, first of all, to make sure you don't have a cancer or something that's going to be negative if we wind up giving you stem cells. But the second component of that is to be able to follow you longitudinally and see how those stem cells are working, not only on your sequential blood test and things that we do, but also your activity levels, so through your wearables and whatnot. So the goal here is to, for the first time, to be able to treat people at scale and collect data to prove that these cellular therapeutics, which we all know work, and everybody has a great story about somebody they know that didn't need a knee replacement, or, even things like autism. We've seen some really remarkable results with autism and people who have gotten stem cells, young people who've gotten stem cells. So I think the idea here is to collect better data and to be able to submit data that bears scrutiny of the scientific community. Because at some point here, it doesn't matter what therapeutic you do, you have to get the regular scientific community to understand it, and you can't get them to understand it unless you have the data.
That's right. Yeah. One of the things that you're known for is in the data side is using technology and now AI for health records. How's that applied to the work you're doing with Fountain?
Yeah, so it's been I would say transformational for certain. So we've spent the last 2 to 3 years really working with generative AI and developing our AI agent called Zori. And what Zori does, and by the way, Zori's name, people ask why we got that name, and people are like, it's kind of an interesting name. It means new beginning. Okay. So for most of our members who come to us, they're either in pretty good shape, but they want to be better, or they may not be in great shape, or they may just be what we call the worried well, meaning that, is there something wrong? Do I need to be checked? Or I just want to live the best, most robust life that I possibly can. So what we've been able to do with Zori, because we collect such an amazing amount of data on you when you come through our process, because we're doing full body and brain MRI. We're doing all your cardiac scans, your genetics, all the analysis of all the gut microbiome. I mean, it's an immense amount of data, more than most physicians are used to getting. And it used to take our doctors a couple of hours just to go through the reports before they have a conversation with you. And now Zori can do that and become like their co-pilot. And she analyzes all the data, and then they can adjust the report, and she can do that in a matter of minutes.
Let's say just a few years ago, if you sat across from I'm thinking, when I say a few years ago, 2-3 years ago, you sat across from a doctor, whatever their level of expertise was with your own results, that's the data. But now you have, studies and the opinions of endless amount of physicians.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, it is. So we publish about 4,000 medical articles every single day, 365 days a year around the world. End of stop. And full stop. That many medical articles, whether they're all accurate or not, is irrelevant. The point being is you can't keep up with the data anymore.
Right.
So you need an AI, right? Just like a pilot needs an autopilot, or a flight management system. There's just too much information coming in. You have to have something to help you distill it down. Our goal at Fountain Life, though, was not just to give the clinicians the ability to have this AI, which is great for the clinicians. They use it all the time. I think I talked to you about your doctor, Dr. Kingsbury, and how he uses it all the time. And we've had physicians tell me if I ever take it away from them, they're going to quit because it makes their job easier and they can spend more time talking to members. But the second component of that is really making that AI available to our members.
Yeah, I was pulling this up. I have my Fountain Life app right here on my phone, and I could just open it right up and see all my lab results. I could go right to my care team. I have my care team right here. I could just bug Dr. Corman right on here and scheduling and look at all my results. And then Zori, I can ask Zori a question and Zori will answer my question based off of all my data. So to have this in the palm of the hand for a patient, a member, I'll keep saying patient, member, right? I've never had anything like that before. So,
well, what's fun about this and what I think is super beneficial for our members, because you can access that app anywhere in the world.
Right.
And so we have members that are traveling overseas and something happens and they say, and the doctor, they go to the ER and the doctor's like, well, what's your history? And here it is.
Yeah.
Here's all my medications, here's my supplements, here's everything. I don't need to remember anything because Zori remembers everything. And the point being, now that we have this type of technology, now you have agency over your health for the first time. You have as much data at Fountain Life, you're on your app, as Dr. Keith does, who's taking care of you.
Well, when I was doing the wolf stack, and I just texted right into Zori, hey, I'm going to do this BP 157. Is it going to conflict with anything that I'm already taking or anything? And she was right away, no, I'm good. Yeah.
So think about
peace of mind.
Yeah, I always tell people what the most common question when you go to the doctor's office is the one you forget to ask when you're walking out the door.
Yeah. And
people go like, I should ask the doctor that question. Yeah. And they don't have anybody they don't really want to call the doctor back and bug them about something they think is not.
Yeah.
Well, you can ask Zori.
Yeah.
And by the way, our teams are monitoring that. So if they see a question that, you have a question, you can certainly contact your team. But more importantly, the fact that your physician can kind of see that dialogue going back and forth with Zori, because this is a clinical decision support tool for us. It's super important. And I think this is the dawn of where AI is going. A lot of people are terrified of AI because they think it's going to take their jobs.
And we all seen Terminator.
We all saw Terminator. That's right. And those robots are here. Yeah, they are coming. Yeah. We're seeing those now. But I do think it is this idea that, look, technology, there is always some job displacement, but it also creates new opportunities. And I think AI will eliminate some of the more mundane things that we do in medicine. Meaning intakes and questionnaires and all that. I mean, how many times you go to the doctor's office and you have to do the same questionnaire over and over and over again, even if it's the same doctor. Yeah. Every time you go in, they're like, okay, fill out this form, or they give you a tablet to fill out. And you're like, I just did this last time. Now you'll have an AI that'll talk to their AI. And so there won't be that question mark. And so the question also then becomes, how more proactive can you get? And so, I mean, if you use wearables, whether you use an Apple Watch or you use an Oura Ring or any of these wearables that are out there, or a sleep aid bed, all that data can be read by your AI now. And so one of our co-founders, he uploaded 25 years worth of wearable data and medical records to Zori. So he was able to get a comprehensive view of his health. And then he asked her questions about I'm not sleeping well. Why am I not sleeping well? And she basically identified a particular supplement that he changed from taking in the morning to started taking in the evening. And she said, you should go back to taking that in the morning. And it corrected his problem. Now, that's something your physician's not going to know. Right. Because they don't have time, number one, to go through all the data. Plus, it's just too much data to see. And once again, AIs don't forget. Okay. Yeah. And they don't get irritated when you ask them a million questions, and you don't have to try that, and they don't hang up on you, if they get irritated with you. So we think this is where we're going to see healthcare really move.
That's amazing. So, I mean, it's, we already we've been talking about Fountain Life, but I want to take a step back and talk about the founding of it. I know there's several founders, yourself being one of them, Tony Robbins, who everyone knows, Tony Robbins. Sure. And I heard the story, and I don't know if it's true. Maybe you could say that Tony had access because of his position in life and his area of influence. He's had access to this type of care for quite some time, but he wanted to make it more available to other people because it was important to him to do that. So
no, absolutely, it's a great question, and I think it's worth going over. So I always tell people, all the founders of the company, myself, Peter, Tony Robbins, Peter Diamandis, Bob Hariri, and a very committed team. We all had day jobs. We didn't need a new job. Okay, yeah. This is part of this. But the idea was when we started to see the emergence of technology and the way that we could possibly really reshape how we do healthcare in the first time. Because the last thing you really want, look, we are great in the United States at, once again, like sick care, like we spoke about. But what you don't want to do is spend the last 10 to 15% of your life in decline. And that's how we do it here in the United States. We manage your decline. And if you know anything about Tony's all about optimal performance mind, body, spirit, staying at the top of your game for as long as you can, and whatever technology that takes to get there, because you want to have a maximal impact on everybody around you. If you start to experience those declines, you can't be at your best. And what we know from the data, and one of the reasons we built Fountain, is we know that you can make 95 healthy today with what we know. We don't need a breakthrough in gene therapy. We don't need a new, particular type of medication to be discovered. With what we know today, you can make 95 healthy. But your first job is don't die of something stupid. Meaning don't die of a disease process that is percolating in your body that you just don't have symptoms for. Because you're not going to get symptoms for heart disease until it's late. You're not going to get symptoms for Alzheimer's till it's late. You're not going to get symptoms from cancer until it's late. And my mom died of stage 4 ovarian cancer, and we didn't catch it until stage 4. So the idea here is to use the technology available. And what Tony really was passionate about, and Peter and all of us, was could we take this concept of using advanced technology and optimization and eventually get it out to the masses. So we built these 4 Fountain Life Centers, but we're excited because we're now getting governments talking to us. We're getting health systems talking to us because the public is moving this direction.
Right.
And if you want to stay a business, you have to follow the customer.
Well, because they're starting to take, I think, a lot of things that one, people don't trust the government anymore and feel like the medical industry has and the government are working hand in hand, and the people aren't being put first. So that I think it's forced the public to take their healthcare in their own hands.
There's no doubt about that. And I think, COVID did us no favors. And I'd be the first to admit, as a medical doctor, we did not do well in COVID. Okay. The system did not do well. I think in addition to that, what it also exposed was how unhealthy the U.S. population really was.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that we spend half of the entire global healthcare spend in the United States, because the whole world only spends about 10 trillion, including us. And we spend half of it. And we rank number 64 in longevity. And we have and our population is massively overweight and unhealthy. And yet the medical system, which is what is normally charged with taking care of you, that your doctor is supposed to be your protector, isn't even giving you the right tools to stay healthy or has the right education to keep you healthy.
Yeah, because they give you insulin before a diet.
Exactly. So this is the problem. I mean, we don't talk about it because, once again, we don't reimburse it. And so that has to change. But look, I'm a firm believer, in American ingenuity. And, Winston Churchill, who's one of my heroes, always said that Americans always do the right thing after they've tried everything else. And I think there is some truth to that, right?
Yeah.
And so we go about our ways. Part of this is getting people educated about what they can and can't do with their bodies. And then, it's easier with athletes because athletes are a little more tuned into their bodies. But if you're not an athlete, you tend to believe what the doctor tells you because you may not be as tuned into your body. But the goal now is for us with Tony to find a way to democratize what we're doing, whether it be through health systems or through, making the data platform more accessible. We do have a high-end product right now, but I always tell people, you have to sell a few $100,000 Teslas till we can sell a $30,000 Tesla because we had to figure out all the algorithms.
Right.
And design the AI. And then now with the AI can be democratized, I think, pretty quickly.
I don't know. I mean, I hear you say that. And I know it's not a price tag that going to Fountain Life isn't a price tag that everyone can afford right now. But it's really hard to put a price tag on your health, and particularly your longevity, because at the end of your life, you'd pay anything for a few more years.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And I think, Tony talks about that all the time. Tony always says, the man with his health has 1,000 dreams. The man without his health has but one. Yeah,
to be healthy.
Exactly.
Yeah. And if you get to the end of your life, you cash out every dollar you have.
Well, and it's interesting because we do. I mean, consequently, we do. And so, once again, this is another one of these things, taking from my aviation history, this, ounce of prevention, we've heard it for years.
It's better than a pound of cure.
But the problem is, what are the tools we're using now? If you go to your family doctor today and he says, okay, we're going to put you on a preventive medicine protocol. What does he do? He pulls out a stethoscope that was invented in 1817. And a reflex hammer that was invented in about 1890. And he has an otoscope to look in your ear.
What's that even do, by the way? Does it tell you anything?
Only if it's late stage. If the reflex doesn't work and it's late stage, we know we have a problem.
Something's wrong.
And the point being, and then we do what in the aviation world, we always say, you do a walk around of the aircraft before you go fly because you want to make sure, the flaps and things, nothing hit the plane. There's no. Yeah. But you probably wouldn't get on a jumbo jet if your pilot just walked around the outside and said, hey, he looks pretty good from out here. Let's go fly.
He's got 2 wings and a tail.
Yeah, you'd say, and that's what you're getting when you go get a physical exam, because those tools are not sufficient to look inside your body.
Yeah.
They're not sufficient to look for disease while it's percolating, whether it be that early stage pancreatic tumor or could be plaque in your arteries. You know, we just don't know. And once again, I can't hear with a stethoscope the plaque in your arteries.
Yeah, I mean, when I went and spent the full day down in Fountain Life up in Dallas, which is, thank you guys' premier facility right now.
Yes, it is.
And the level of data that came back was just mind blowing. My blood pressure runs high. And so there's a lot of things I was concerned about, and coming back to knowing like, no, you're good. Like your blood pressure runs high, but you're clear. When like what it did for me mentally, because I trained pretty hard at jiu-jitsu, like there's always like this reservation in the back of my mind, like, should I push this hard? Because I pushed like I'm a mind of 25 years old, and I'm like, what it did for me mentally was like just took all the governors off, and I could slam that throttle. Now, and so it really just gave a huge peace of mind just on the cardiovascular side, but then also like my family, I have a family history of like dementia and these different things and cardiovascular disease, which is probably not, in my opinion, hereditary. I live a much different lifestyle. I'm from South Louisiana, so you know, they call it the holy trinity of South Louisiana: onions, grease, and flour. So my family didn't live as healthy as I do, a lifestyle. So just knowing that I don't have a predisposition to those things just because my family died that way. And on a typical medical form before, it kind of scares you because you're like, does your mother have heart disease? Does your father have heart disease? And you're like, oh man, that means I'm going to have heart disease. But just being able to look at those things, and I think you guys call it predictive care.
Yeah, so the idea is to be proactive and predictive, and I think look, I mean, it's great. Look, that peace of mind that you have now, we see over and over and over again in our members. Because people come in and, it's not uncommon. Somebody said, you ask them, because one of the concepts is, how long do you want to live? And people say, well, I don't want to live to 120 because I saw a 120-year-old and I don't want to look like that. But the question really becomes, if you can live at the top of your game at 95, would you take that? And most people say yes, because, they may know a 95-year-old, they just don't know anybody who's at the top of their game. Although it doesn't take much to look around and see it's somebody like Sylvester Stallone, who's still, jacking 300 in the gym. And, and he's a classic case of somebody.
How old is he now, by the way?
He's like 79, I think.
Yeah, he's a monster.
He's a monster, right?
Yeah.
And look, he's taking advantage of all the technology. He's not one of our members, but I'm just saying he's one of those people out there who can show you that the human body is capable of doing things, and you don't have to accept this fate to decline. And I think that's part of it. One of we've had a lot of clients come in. So for instance, one of Tony Robbins, he talks about this in his book, Life Force, that his father-in-law was in his 70s. And Tony brought him over for testing, for cardiovascular testing that you were talking about, that you went through, because he said all of his friends were dying around him. And he got depressed. And quite frankly, he said, all my friends are dying.
Am I next?
Am I next? And by the way, my family doesn't have a great history and all that. So Tony brought him over. Turns out, like Tony says, his arteries were better than Tony's. His heart was better than Tony's. And so Tony said, he came on the way back. He said, look, I feel great. He goes, you know what? Now thinking about all this, I think I may go back to playing tennis again. And I might do this and I might do it. My point being, you shouldn't listen. The law of averages is what we call population health. And that's how we take care of people today. We've done it for years, but we live in a world of precision medicine now, meaning we can give you what you need, not what the masses need. Not the recommendation for every white guy that's 50 years old anymore. We can look at your genetics. We can look at your scans. We can give you exactly what you need to optimize your performance.
And your lifestyle. Which, everybody's so different. Like, and especially in America, you have people that are extremely, you have health nuts and you have couch potatoes.
Exactly.
Pretty far extremes. And
well, one of the things I do think is worth mentioning, because you mentioned, people talk about, lifestyle and family history. One of the reasons you check off those boxes from the doctor's office is to look at family history, because that family history gives us an idea what your genetics were. And that's all we had until we could sequence your genome. Now we can look at all your lifestyle risk factors and we can look at your genes for what different diseases. But what is very clear, and one of our advisors is Dr. Eric Verdin from the Buck Institute, and they've got data. There's the #1 longevity institute in the world, and their data correlates with what I think our clinical experience is that aging is probably only 7% genetic. It's 93% lifestyle. So the point is, when people want to blame bad genes, I got bad genes, my family has bad genes. I've heard that for years. What you have to remember is genes load the gun, but environment pulls the trigger.
Right.
So just because you have bad genes for Alzheimer's doesn't mean you're going to succumb to Alzheimer's disease. You can avoid it with the proper lifestyle and the proper coaching.
But the genes could also mean the environment, right? Like if, is my son sitting over there. So he's been around me since he's 25 years old. He's been around me for 25 years. So a lot of his lifestyle habits are going to mimic mine. So if I have bad lifestyle habits, he's going to pick up those bad lifestyle habits and suffer some of the same consequences that necessarily mean it's genetic.
Because when you start talking about, the things that are going to adversely impact your health, and particularly your epigenetic expression and damage those mitochondria we're talking about, it's going to be, the fats, the sugars, the things that we know are not inherently healthy for us. And yet we tend to label them onto everything that we want to eat. And I grew up in Atlanta, so I understand, I have family all throughout, southern Alabama, southern Mississippi. And, if it's not covered in flour and fried, people just don't eat it. That's just kind of how we grew up. But I do think now with the age of AI and the age of information, people are starting to ask questions. And I think there's a lot more information. Interesting statistic. The pharma business in the world today is about $1.5 trillion business globally. The wellness business in the world today is a $4.5 trillion business. Wow. So if you're really looking to stake out a claim in the future where healthcare is going and where wellness is going, it's a much bigger bucket to go after wellness than it is to go after pharma.
That's really interesting to hear. It's encouraging that maybe they'll let go.
Well, we're seeing this.
Shift.
We're seeing this around. I just came back from Europe where I was giving a few talks, and I can tell you, it may not be front and center in the United States.
That's what I was going to ask. What's those ratios in the U.S.? Is it
in terms of
is it lean? Is it the ratios, financial ratios? Is it more money being invested in wellness in the States?
So half of that almost $5 trillion budget, $4.5 trillion, half of that spend is here in the United States, which is great because that shows, and you can sign it, you see it right now. That wellness spend could be anything from gym memberships to nutraceuticals to healthy food to, there's a lot. It encompasses a lot, but it is a big and a growing chunk of the market, and it will continue to get that big. And I think what everybody's kind of come to the conclusion of, particularly worldwide, is that birth rates are rapidly declining worldwide. And if we don't find a way to keep people healthier longer, we're going to have a problem.
One of the things you talked about, age, and I think one of the things I enjoyed most about going to have my full diagnostics at Fountain Life was learning that my biological age was 36.
That's awesome.
Not
that's
50.
Great.
So
that's really good. 14
years down. So if somebody asks me now, my new age is 36.
Yeah, perfect. Well, that's great. Well, look, that's great. So that shows you that at a cellular level, your body's functioning extremely well.
Yeah.
And when you have that, we just know that if you're there's your calendar age, what the calendar says. And this is what your physiologic age is, which is what the youthfulness of your body is at a cellular level.
Right.
When we measure that physiologic age, if it's 7 years younger than your calendar age, you will reduce your risk for chronic disease by over 50%.
14 for me.
So there you go.
I wonder how much of that has to do with 4 years into stem cell.
We think stem cells have a huge impact. We've seen data. We haven't put it all together out of all of our people that have been through stem cells. We're in the process of collecting that data now. But we are seeing a really massive reduction in physiologic age for people who have been through stem cell therapy. One of our physicians, Dr. Shapiro, his physiologic age is significantly younger since he got stem cells. He's had about 3 different stem cell infusions. Dr.
Caroline at Accelerator, who I think you have met, she's 20 years
That's
below
awesome.
her age. Yeah. She's been doing stem cells annually for 10 years now.
That's awesome.
And so that's
that regenerative capacity, right? I mean, that and where do you get that? By the way, you don't want old stem cells, right?
I want the baby ones, like the fountain of youth.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And the problem with that is, people ask why do we use cord blood stem cells versus, because some people do fat derived stem cells. Some people take them out of your marrow. You can go to, that's kind of traditional.
But those are 50-year-old stem cells.
50-year-old stem cells, with a lifetime of, toxin exposure and everything else. So I think the idea here is to go young if you can. And obviously now that we have look, the other thing that is interesting, and, from my perspective, is these stem cells that come from cord blood and placental tissue, what's really important is that they come from full-term pregnancies.
It's ethical.
It's ethical, number one. But here's some of the most interesting thing. If you harvest stem cells from aborted tissue, they're toxic. You can't use them. They're totally toxic.
Not only is it amazing, but it's good.
It's good. I agree. I totally agree. So I think this is the one of these things. By the way, we've been throwing placentas away and sending them to the incinerator for years. It was considered after birth. Just throw it on the ground and throw it in the trash can.
That's been the first question that I get regularly, probably because of my audience. I have a very strong evangelical audience. So like, yeah, but what's the efficacy? And that's one of the first questions I had. And as these are full-term babies with who volunteered to parent the mother, and they only take them, at least in Colombia, they only take them if the mother and baby were healthy and born healthy, and it was a successful delivery. And they have all the data that support it, and like you had said, I didn't know it was toxic, but I knew that wasn't usable if it was aborted.
Well, you can imagine. I mean, the distress of the baby, the stress of the placenta. I mean, it's the same reason we don't, like, for instance, at Fountain, we have all of our data we collect from asymptomatic individuals. We're not in the hospital collecting data because those people are already really sick and in extremis. And the information we would get from that just wouldn't be very valuable. One
of the things that you guys talk about at Fountain Life is that you guys detect issues early on in 14% of the members. What type of things are you guys detecting?
Yeah. So interestingly, our average age is 52. Okay. We skew a little bit more male. About 55% of our members are male, 45% are women. But what's interesting about this is what we look at, full body and brain MRI, the cardiac scans and everything else. Turns out 90% of the people that come through our doors have some form of coronary disease. What the most amazing thing we've seen in looking at our data is that we're picking up coronary disease that's really significant in a significant number of people. So when I say 14% of people have potentially, that we find, have something that could be potentially life-threatening, that could be a 70% or greater blockage of the main artery of your heart, which, by the way, can be reversed. And we've got data showing how we can stabilize or reverse your heart disease. So that is available
non-surgical?
Non-surgical.
That's what you're suggesting.
Some of it's pharmacologic. A lot of it's lifestyle, right? Sometimes it's using some regenerative biologics. So I think that's super important. Other things that we find early stage cancers. We find, aneurysms. As a matter of fact, one of our partners, Sam Nazarian, who we're, working with to build, to embed Fountain Life in resorts around the world. We found and this is, I'm not revealing anything here because he did a story for Barron's, but we found a 7.5 millimeter aneurysm in his brain, and he was, late 40s. And by the way, he had the best doctors he could possibly have at Cedars-Sinai, and he had the best concierge doctors. And we found 2 aneurysms that had to be surgically treated in his brain, and he was totally asymptomatic. And when the neurosurgeon who had to do the operation on him, because they had to do a craniotomy, which means lift part of your skull up to go in and clip this, he asked him, he said, well, how did you find out about this? And he said, well, I was just going through this testing because I was looking at this partnership, and they said, oh, go through the testing. And so when they found it, he goes, well, tell them they saved your life. Because when that ruptures and then where that was, he probably wouldn't have made it to the emergency room.
It'd have been.
And by the way, the other thing that bears repeating is when you talk about cardiovascular disease, the most common presenting symptom of cardiovascular disease is sudden death. Because half of their people...
That's why I call it a silent killer, right?
Right. Because half the people who don't, have a heart attack, half of them don't survive the first heart attack. And by the way, I gave a talk yesterday up in, we were at an event, and I just finished going through this data, and one of the women stood up and she said, yeah, our CFO, mid-50s, just dropped out of a heart attack 2 weeks ago. And everybody knew who he was in the room. So my point is, the tests that we're currently doing are not sufficient. Having just elevated blood cholesterol isn't going to rule in or rule out whether or not you have significant disease.
Can you talk about cholesterol? That's been something that I've heard very mixed reviews on. We always were told fat was a bad thing, and now we're seeing that fat's not a bad thing. I've always loved butter. Was told I couldn't eat butter. Now I'm told I can, and I eat a lot of butter.
Yeah.
Because it's good quality grass-fed butter. And I eat a lot of meat now, red meat, which I was told before, don't eat a lot of red meat. Now I'm like, red meat, butter, salt, all these things I was told not to eat, I eat, are high in my diet. But it raises cholesterol, but one of the two cholesterol. So is cholesterol good? Is cholesterol bad?
Well, so your cholesterol has a major function, right? It's a precursor to every major hormone in your body. So you have to have some cholesterol.
Right.
Your brain is largely composed of cholesterol. So that's important. But also the question becomes, what are you measuring and what are we managing? And so we're really big believers that you need to measure in order to manage. Meaning we can show you our data. We just looked at 5,000 people. The most predictive thing we saw in our data for cardiac plaque and how much plaque you have in your arteries wasn't cholesterol. It was your blood sugar, it was your inflammatory markers, and it was oxidative fatty acids. Okay, well and above anything to do with cholesterol. So once again, we've got people that have been through our process. I would say 10% have elevated cholesterol, and most people want to put them on a statin, and they have no plaque whatsoever. We have people with cholesterol in the 100s with a lot of plaque.
But you have doctors putting people on stats and never telling them to drop the sugar.
Part of the reason is that what statins are really good at, there's an anti-inflammatory component, but what statins will do is they'll take that non-calcified plaque in your vessels, that's the one that was responsible for rupturing and cause a heart attack, and it calcifies it. Okay, so it basically is like taking a weak spot in the wall and putting spackle over it. Okay? And that's what statins do. And it doesn't reverse your heart disease, but it would stabilize you from having the risk of heart disease. But on the other hand, when we look at things like semaglutide, GLP-1s, and you're seeing all these out there with these weight loss drugs now, they're just as effective as statins at reducing the risk for heart disease. What do? They lower blood sugar. So once again, do we know? No. I would argue that if you're over 40, you need a baseline CCTA with an AI overlay, because otherwise you're just guessing. And once what you found is, because now you have the information becomes power. And because you have a doctor who's been well trained to look at all of your data and knows you from everything from your genetics to your lifestyle to your microbiome, they can, when you say, I want to have more red meat, I want to have more butter, they go, okay, we looked at all your data and you're good to go, right? So once again, it's not a one size fits all. I think so unless you have an identical twin, everybody in the United States is genetically distinct. We're all individuals.
Identical twins aren't.
Identical twins are absolutely genetically identical.
That's right.
They share the exact same genes. Okay, you can have fraternal twins, or you can have identical twins. Identical twins are genetically indistinguishable. But what's important about it is that because of that genetic heterogeneity, what we have in this genetic diversity, we have the ability now with precision medicine to give you that customized response. And I think that's super important.
Yeah. So a lot of people right now are taking semaglutide, tirzepatide, these different Ozempics. Now that people have been on it for a while, we're hearing that it's not healthy, the side effects. What's the truth with these medications?
Yeah. So we believe they're actually going to become probably one of the biggest arsenals we have for longevity, because what we are seeing is, this tight control of blood sugar is super important, number one. Number two, it definitely makes a difference in weight loss. I mean, we know people that do really super well with this. There are side effects, so you needed to make sure you deal with your physician to make sure which one you need. It's not a magic bullet. You still have to go to the gym. You have to exercise. You've got to eat the right diet, all of that. But it does help. Okay, we do know that. What we're seeing, though, is cognitive improvement in a lot of people, significant cognitive improvement. We're seeing other parts of the health of an individual that we weren't anticipating. We thought this was just going to be about, diabetes control and weight loss, but we're seeing a pretty wide variety of effects in it. So, a matter of fact, the chairman of Eli Lilly, who makes one of these drugs, was just recently at the there's a thing called the Age-Related Drug Discovery Conference in Copenhagen, and he was there saying, we believe this is probably the first longevity drug. Because if I can keep your blood sugar tightly controlled, I avoid so many downstream problems, it's not even funny. And if I can also now, with our data showing that we control your blood sugar tightly, and also we're not giving up on your cholesterol. We're going to look at that. But what we're seeing is the ability of people's cognitive function. Liver fat goes down tremendously with this,
which is a huge health
risk. So once again, it's using the technology we have. Look, nothing's going to substitute getting in the gym. And if you're on one of these medications, your biggest risk is loss of muscle mass.
That's what I was going to ask. Yeah.
You need to be in the gym. By the way, you can fight it, but you're not destined to not do it. But you're not going to be a couch potato taking these GLP-1s and not lose muscle mass.
That's to say you can maintain the muscle mass if you're probably supplementing with a good healthy diet, working out, and testosterone. If you make sure your testosterone, all your hormones are in.
Correct.
Right.
We want to optimize you across the board. And if this is an additional drug that we can bring to bear, it makes a lot of sense. I think it's important to understand that, the muscle mass component of this, I mean, it's been a little bit overrated. I think the medication is a little bit overdosed, to be honest. And so a lot of people are doing what they call microdosing, where they take half or a quarter of the normal dose. They still get all the same benefits, but they're not getting as much muscle mass loss. So I think we're learning our way through this because it's a relatively new drug, but it's getting really common. We're going to see it come off of formula. I mean, it comes off a patent in Canada, I think next year. And so it'll come off the United States a few years later. But the point is it's out there now in the market. But you do have to be careful with it because it can cause, stomach upset. It can cause some other problems.
Heartburn.
That's a big one because it slows gastric emptying. But the other component of that
is permanent? Like heartburn will be permanent or just be wild?
Most of the time people will get used to it or they lower their dose and that makes a big difference. But I think that once again, we're learning. It's a new class of drug that we're learning about. Look, there's still nothing better than eating right and exercising. And once again, if you want optimal cognitive function, lift weights. And I'm not talking about like a 5-pound dumbbell. You have to lift heavy.
Yeah.
If you leave the gym and 2 days later, you're not a little bit sore, you didn't lift heavy enough. Okay. It's super important to remember that.
That's straight from the doctor.
Straight from the doctor. Yeah. and my coaches over the years. So yeah.
This I guess just to clarify, people that are taking it can feel safe. There's not any like life-altering side effects.
We've not seen anything. I mean, you'll see that there's one of the warnings they always go, oh, well, if you've had multiple endocrine neoplasia syndrome type, whatever. I mean, there's no real data around that. Okay. So we haven't seen that. There is a risk in some patients of getting pancreatitis and stuff, but I think if the dose is starting a little too high in those cases, but for the most part, for the vast majority of people that we've put on that medication, we've had really good results with.
Yeah. That's really encouraging to hear because I've some family members that have used it and some friends that have used it. It's one guy in jiu-jitsu. It looks like he looks like
well, there are new ones coming out.
Half the size as well.
Well, there's some new ones coming out too. There's a new one called Retrivatide that will come out with Eli Lilly here. Probably it's available. Some compounding pharmacies make it right now, and it's even got more capability. So once again, this is a whole new class of drug, and we'll see more modifications, I think, over the next few years.
So in all this, Dr. Kapp, you started off as a flight surgeon. How does that apply to your everyday work at Fountain Life? Well,
I mean, I still get to fly, which is great.
Yeah. What do you fly?
I fly a Phenom 100.
Okay.
Which is a light jet, but it's a great airplane, and I've flown for years. So I like flying. It gets me out of the office, and it also gets me clear my head a little bit when I'm talking to ATC and not having to talk to my CFO, which works out well. But I think that ultimately where I think having that military background, that Air Force background, that attention to prevention, that attention to detail, and the attention to safety has probably been the biggest impact on being able to do that. And I think also, look, when I served, we were fortunate. I did not have to, go direct combat. We flew, the C-141, and we were actually, this was a few years ago. It's now been replaced by the C-17 Globemaster for medevacs. And so we were medevacing guys out of Afghanistan.
Like the aeromedical units, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
And so we medevaced. So once, we would get you from the forward battle zone back to a triage hospital. And then once they needed, we really were picking and flying because there were no resources in Afghanistan, really.
Yeah. You eventually get them to launch stool.
Yep, that's correct. And so we were either medevacing there or over into Ramstein as well. And then from there, they would do definitive stabilization sometimes and then transport them from there back to the States for rehab and stuff. And so I think, that idea of, doing and serving, and obviously, serving with everybody that we served with. And, obviously we were in support role for every one of the branches, which was great. But, seeing that level of sacrifice and the fact that we could bring those types of technologies to bear to bring them home was super important. Yes. And then also, being able to take those principles of safety and service and bring that to what we do at Fountain is super important.
So everyone loves Tony. Tony Robbins is an American treasure. And I'm really thankful that he had a heart to share this level of care with as many people as he can. What's it been like working with him for those who those of us who don't know them get to work with him? Yeah. We hear him speak and we hear all his principles and theories. What's it like to get to work?
So he's exactly the same person in private as he is in public. There's like no difference in the Tony. He just may not be as loud in private. But I've been very fortunate to spend a lot of time with him and Peter as well and Bob. But I think one of the things, it's interesting. I had Tony's cassette tapes in 1991. Right. And I was joking with him about the other day, and he says, "Oh, you should burn those tapes." And I said, "No, why would I do that? They're a collector's item. I wouldn't keep these." But look, I have followed Tony for years. What has been very, I would say, rewarding is the number of people that we've intersected inside Fountain when we talk to people, whether it be in the banking industry or like Mark Benioff for Salesforce and others, where Tony had such a pivotal role in getting them to get off the couch and get out of their own way. And to what he always says, take massive action. So Tony's gift is, outside of being a great coach and a motivator, but he'll be the first one to tell you he's not here to solve your problems. He's here to get you motivated to go solve your problems. And then the second component of that is get moving physically, right? Because mind, body. And he always says, you start with your body, start with your health, get off the couch. Go exercise, go lift weights, take massive action, because thinking about the problem is not going to solve it. And I told him, I said, when I started Fountain, because there was a precursor company that we started called Longevity Performance Center that I started. And I started that company and I had a little reservations because I was very traditionally trained. I mean, I went to Baylor College of Medicine. I did all my papers. I did my orthopedic stuff. I was supposed to go out and work a whole career in orthopedics for the rest of my life. Supposed to be buried with a, knee replacement on my tombstone. That was kind of what my job was going to be. And to in the first, few years of kind of going into the longevity space, everybody's like, what are you doing?
Yeah, you're like a trader.
Yeah, thank you, trader, but what are you doing? Well, we're building this platform. We're going to detect disease and we're going to transform healthcare and go from reactive to proactive and extend healthy lives. And they're all like, you're crazy. And I mean, even I had a physician even stand up in a meeting saying, I don't know why you're doing all those body scans. You're just going to find things. And I'm like, yes, exactly. Well, and so, by the way, that's a common criticism, that we overscan and all this, and we're going to find things and we're going to do unnecessary tests because it's going to turn out to be nothing. And what I would just tell you is our false positive rate, which is the number of times a week get it wrong, is well below 4%. So the important part of that is to remember that we do so many different overlapping tests that our false positive rate goes way down. So, but with Tony, what's interesting is his belief in what we can do and he has an unshakable belief that anybody in any group of people who are committed, and people have talked about this for years, can change something. And so I'll give you a classic example. I mean, outside, we believe Fountain Life will be that case. But what we did do with Tony recently, or what Tony's done by himself, we didn't have any part of it. Tony decided that he was going to, so, he's always fed people. That was like one of his things from his childhood, because he, grew up hungry, and, somebody tried to feed them on Thanksgiving Day and they brought him a Thanksgiving meal. And so he, the next year, fed 2 families, and he's done it every single year. And he got up to where, early in his career, he's doing 1 million families a year. So he has a huge food outreach. And a lot of people are unaware of that. And a lot of times he doesn't get much press here in the U.S. because Tony does so much under the radar that you'll never know about. He does a lot, and we'll talk about a few of those. But one of the things he did is a few years ago, he decided, because there was still a worldwide hunger problem, the Ukraine issue was happening, food supplies were being intercepted and or even diverted. and people were still starving in the Sudan and everywhere. And so he had met with the former head of the World Food Bank and recruited him over, and they decided that their goal would set a goal of of providing 100 billion meals. And he just was at a conference and they fed 65 billion meals. And they're doing it with drones.
Yeah.
They're doing airdrops into areas that in order so the militias don't get a hold of the food.
I think we got 8-9 billion people in the world.
Right. But people are starving, right?
Yeah.
And so once again, what does that mean? That means because he's now at a level where because he believed in something so passionately, he's able to amplify his effects.
Yeah.
Through multiple things. And he's done the same thing with child trafficking, right? Yep. So I think he told me their latest count is they're up to 78,000 kids that they've rescued. So amazing. That level of passion that he brings to those areas, he brings to what we do at Fountain. Yeah. And so when we meet with him, and we're very fortunate to have him sit on our board because he's super busy and he's involved with so many different companies around the world. But his goal is the same. It's remained the same since we started the company. With the number one, build a world-class platform, and number two, democratize access so that we can change healthcare so that we all don't have to live our last decade or more in decline.
So, you, Tony, Peter and Bob have built an incredible thing. And I think I believe, and I hear it in your message here, it's just the beginning.
We hope so.
It's to serve so many people. What is the access point for those listening that would say, I'm super interested. How do I get started? What's it look like for someone to become a member and get that preventative care, that diagnostics level to know, prediction care? Like what would be the entry level? How could someone start?
Yeah, so we have a couple of different ways to do that. The easiest place to go is to fountainlife.com, and you can learn about everything that we do. And we have people that can answer questions for you. We've got a couple different levels of membership there. One is at the higher end, and and then we have one kind of in the middle. Hopefully, we'll even be able to develop one a little bit lower than that. We're kind of working on that right now. But the idea here is to have you for the first time start the journey somewhere. Because once again, information is power. Having something like Zori in your hand with all your healthcare data and an AI assistant that knows you better than you know yourself is something that you can now utilize. And by the way, one of the things we're important about is security. We have a very secure system. We use we're HIPAA high trust certified, use SOC 2 encryption. All of that's super important for us. But I think, Fountain Life is probably the easiest way to do that. Go to fountainlife.com and you can start to take the deep dive. Certainly sign up for a newsletter because we certainly send that out and that gives you updates periodically. I would encourage you to follow, Peter Diamandis has a podcast. He talks about Fountain periodically. Obviously, Tony's got his podcast and he does, different things around the country and around the world. There's lots of ways you can access this information. Our goal at Fountain, though, is really to kind of cut through a lot of the noise. As you know, in the longevity movement, there's a lot out there.
Yes.
Do you want to shake? Do you want to stim? Do you want red light? Do you want to plunge? I mean, it's all over the place. Should I do NAD? Should I not do NAD?
People get grounding blankets and
whatever. I mean, I'm not here to just dissuade anybody or cast dispersions. All I'm saying is whatever you're doing, you need to measure it so you can manage it. And if you can measure it and show an improvement, then by all means, continue to do it. But what we try to do at Fountain is scour the world for the technology that you need to optimize your health. And so, our members have one common thread through them is that you can rest assured that there's probably not a technology that we haven't seen. And if it's not in Fountain, it's not in Fountain Life for a reason. But if it is there, it is because we vetted it very carefully. And we're trying to become that. Look, our goal is to be the trusted fiduciary of your health so that whatever our docs are recommending to her, whatever our care teams are recommending, it's already been vetted. You don't need to go on the internet and go try to search it yourself. If you want to, that's great. But
it's a good single source, right? You go to Fountain Life instead of watching some guru and they say, take all your clothes off and put your rear end up to the sun.
Yeah, because right now we're in the copycat mode, right? I mean, you think about it. I mean, there's some great influencers in the longevity space, but we're in the copycat mode. Right. If it's good for that guy, it must be good for me.
Yeah.
I heard this podcast, I should be eating this, and maybe I'll eat that. And yet we're not measuring anything.
Right.
And so once again, it goes back to kind of the simple things. We do this in aviation. We do it in a lot of other fields. You have to measure so you can manage.
Well, that's awesome. I feel I really enjoyed this. I feel very informed. And again, super thankful for allowing me to be a member and experiment with it. And it's been a phenomenal experience with me so far. We're going to show some video to the audience, by the way, of some of my experience with you guys.
Awesome.
And some of my data as well. And then I know you guys also are supporting. I just want to say thank you. You guys are supporting the Mighty Oaks Gala coming up. So we have a Mighty Oaks Gala, which is our main fundraiser for the Mighty Oaks Foundation, which we've served over 500,000 warriors and first responders through military and first responders through Mighty Oaks. And we have a gala coming up. Kaylee McEnany is
That's awesome.
is the speaker. And we have a lot of great companies that are supporting that event, but you guys are one of them. So thank you for the support.
Well, I'm glad to do it. And thank you for having me. Look, I'm a big fan of your work. I mean, you're obviously mission driven, and yes, things you do are amazing. And what you did in Afghanistan was just staggering to me. I mean, outside of everything else you do, I know what a difficult combat theater that was, and to go back repetitively was quite a testimony. And congratulations. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, sir. We have some great sponsors for the show, and we always give amazing gifts. So first of all, we can give you some stuff from Mighty Oaks, some copies of some of my books.
Oh, fantastic! But
Smith & Wesson, Firearms, Vortex Optics, and Gators Eyewear. We're gonna equip you with a gun and
awesome.
with a great optic on it and some good glasses to keep your eyes safe. We have some. Supplement company, BioPro. I think I told Jay about BioPro there.
Okay.
It's an oral supplement that you could try out and see. Maybe it's something
happy to do
you
that.
guys like. And BioAccelerator is another partner of ours. And
okay.
I know, like I said, I want to make sure you guys are, even if you guys are just in the same direction. So I want to make sure that you guys are locked arms in some sort of way. But we just have some amazing partners who always thankful for our guests and thankful of you. So we're going to make sure you walk away with more swag than you probably get in any other.
It sounds like the best swag as far as I'm concerned. So.
Although I got to say, you guys give some good gifts too. That eye thing.
The sleep mask?
Sleep mask. That's the best sleep mask I've ever had.
That's a really
I lost
one.
it, so I got to go back up. It was the best sleep mask.
Well, if you lose it, let us know. We can always replace it.
Oh no, I did.
You did. Okay.
So it was like
All
I left it on a plane somewhere because I went to sleep with it.
Yeah, it makes
that was
a big
like the
difference.
best one.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about sleep. That's a whole other category we can get into at some point.
You got to get that full 8-9 hours, right?
That, and you need to measure it, right? So you know how you sleep and when you get your deep sleep, because it's super important. There's certain phase of your brain, your sleep cycle, that is responsible for when your brain cleans itself.
Okay.
And so it's super important to measure that. And you can do that through our Apple Watch or a Ring, however you want to do it.
If you don't mind, when we stop this, if I could get you to do like a 5-minute sleep segment.
Sure.
Put
Happy
it
to do
on
that.
Patreon and drive some extra traffic there.
No, happy to do that.
So you guys got to wait and go to, he's going to give a little, Dr. Kapp's going to give a little sleep tutorial of how important it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thanks again, Dr. Kapp.
Thank you
thank
so
you
much.
guys for listening. If you have not done so, please like, comment, share this out. This is even if you feel like this information was good for you, everyone needs to hear this, whether they go on to Fountain Life or not. It's just very important to understand how to take care of your body mentally, physically, socially, spiritually. This is resilience, and this is a resilient show. And this is foundationally one of the most important things you can do is take care of your body so that you can live the maximum potential for the life that you're given. And so we'll see you guys next week. Stay resilient, and God bless. A program like Fountain Life is essential for helping leaders, especially in the area of business, athletics. I do a lot of public speaking. I'm on the news a lot. I write books. I'm leading special operations, humanitarian missions around the world. There's lots of things that I do that I rely on my physical ability. I rely on my skills and experience, and I rely on my teammates. So there's certain things I rely on, but there's certain things that I've noticed over time that I've neglected, and that's my health. I'll go out on the road and push a pace to where I'm not sleeping, I'm not having the right nutrition, I'm not working on my mobility. I don't even know if I'm sick or not, or what I'm prone to, because I haven't been intentional about those things. And as I'm getting older and wiser and trying to be most efficient, I've learned that when I'm focused on my overall health, physical, mental, social, spiritual, when I'm focused on my overall health, I'm able to get optimal performance out of myself and get the most out of myself. I'm able to be my body feels healthy and strong. My mind feels has the ability to feel clear and sharp and efficient, and be able to think and function well. And socially, I'm able to make good decision making out of surrounding myself with the right people. And the same goes with my spiritual aspect. So I believe what Fountain Life offers is the ability for us to be intentional and to make wise decisions to give us our optimal performance and just give us the resources and support to do that.